Only a single female Kong warrior was left standing in the battered fortification. Her war brother was dead, and she was pressing gauze to her mortally wounded war master's chest, trying to stop the bleeding. An explosion rocked the fortification, which caused her to fumble and fall onto the poor wounded female war master, causing her to whimper in pain.
Donna, leave this place before the demons take you as well,
her war master weakly gasped. Donna, in a panic, stood and returned fire with a heavy plasma caster, desperately trying to ward off these specters of death. She yelped and ducked as more of these awful hisses and snaps cracked by her. She quickly learned these sounds took lives in a horrible fashion, as she peered at her war brother. Half the back of his head was missing, and chunks of his brain matter was scattered on the wall and floor. More snaps and cracks sounded as dirt splashed in her face, and a small wooden beam snapped in half, causing some dirt to slowly fall in. Donna was never supposed to be here. She never wanted to fight this terrible war. She was born as a worker, not a warrior. All she had ever done was work as a grower. She tended gardens and grew tubers to feed the lowborn population, and to be honest, that's all she'd ever wanted to do. She was too small to be a warrior. The lack of meat in her diet meant her growth was stunted. Unlike the highborn and warriors, the warriors ate meat and tubers, but the highborn only ate meat. Sapient meat. Lowborn meat. Each cluster was chosen at birth to be who they are and do what they do. Those that were bigger were nurtured for war. Everyone else was a worker, unless they were unfortunate enough to be chosen as a highborn slave. The red-scaled highborn were larger and stronger than even the warriors. What defined them was a strip of red scales running down their back, and one's position in high society was determined by how many red scales one was born with. Everyday life was difficult. Just going about your business ran the risk of a highborn grabbing you and dragging you to their personal den if they fancied you, for their pleasure or for their next meal. The warriors were the ones to fight and die in their wars, and those wars were only waged to acquire more slaves and more food. Now she was made to fight their wars too, and she had no business being on the battlefield. When the Imperials were detected in the system, they only allowed 1/10 of the population to flee, the highborn and their slaves. The rest of the population, even younglings, were pressed into service to push back the legion of invaders, to allow the ships to escape unscathed. It had been a disaster. Thousands of ships drifted, shattered across the solar system, and millions of lives had been lost. Planetside, Donna and the other conscripts were handed weapons and armor, then given a week-long training course, and told to defend what was left of the planet. They were to cause as much harm to the Imperials before they perished. She despised the highborn. They left them to die on this accursed planet, and took her egg sisters and brothers as slaves to sate them on their travels to the core worlds. Donna didn't know why the lowborn like her and the warriors fought the highborn's wars, but her treasonous thoughts were soon interrupted by another barrage of rounds slamming into her position. She didn't even bother with aiming. Donna couldn't see them anyways. She kept her head below the opening and exposed only her arm to return fire. The armor that these Imperials were wearing made it impossible to understand where they really were, if they weren't running across the backdrop of a jungle. She peeked out and saw a pair of silhouettes running to flank some of her war brothers and sisters. She took aim for once and fired, hoping to slay one of the demons, or at least stop them from killing any more of her people. She yelped in fear and hit the ground when a messenger stormed in and tripped over the dead body of her war brother. The look of terror filled the messenger's face, looking around.
"What happened here? Stay down,"
Donna yelled, went back to cowering and firing the weapon. The thing was starting to overheat. She was worried it was going to catch fire.
"War sister, reinforcements from the training cluster have arrived."
The messenger stood up and continued.
"Gather your courage. You cannot cower like this."
Donna watched in horror as the messenger was struck in the throat. The messenger hit the floor and started gurgling, clutching her throat. Donna started weeping.
"No, you fool. I said stay down."
She finally let go of her weapon and crawled to the skirming messenger.
"War Master, what do I do?"
she pleaded.
"War Master!"
she screamed. But when she turned to look at her War Master that was leaning against the wall, she was staring right at her, but she was no longer moving. Dread overcame her as the messenger's struggle gradually faded and stopped moving as well. This time, a roar of small explosions and a barrage of bullets slammed into the fortification. A few rounds hit the weapons battery banks, causing it to spurt fire.
"The demons!"
Donna screamed in sorrow and fear. She left the poor lifeless messenger and decided to heed the War Master's earlier warning. She had to flee. She crawled and crawled until she made her way outside, but all that awaited her was a scene from hell. The carnage was devastating. Bodies lay scattered everywhere, the screams of the wounded as they were dragged to cover by their comrades. She could barely hear the sounds of the desperate defenders yelling commands to ward off the invisible devils, when another barrage of bullets came. She lay still, covering head as she witnessed two unfortunate souls cut down as they tried dragging one of their wounded comrades to safety. Donna low crawled past the two lifeless corpses. There was nothing she could do for them, as tears streamed down her face. She didn't know how long she crawled, but all she knew is her body screamed and she was now deep in the jungle, and near the path leading to the den. There she saw her egg brothers, another worker conscripted to push the invaders back. He was helping two much larger warriors carry a heavy plasma caster to the front lines. Donna looked further behind them and saw 150 mixed troops of warriors and conscripts. They sent an entire war cluster as reinforcements from the den, along with their own war chief. She got to her knees and grabbed her egg brother.
"But brother San, there are demons. You can't go," she pleaded.
San gave her a worried look at the word demons, but steeled himself.
"We must push the invaders out, sister. This is our home."
Then came the war chief, the largest female warrior she had ever seen. The war chief pushed her way to the front of the cluster and looked down at Donna.
"Begone, coward. Make your way back to the den and report to the War Mother about your cowardice. I shall lash you myself when I return."
The giant Kong sneered. Donna looked back at San, with anguish on her face, pleaded once more.
"Brother San, please."
San looked away from his egg sister and said,
"I was born here. I'll die here."
The war chief looked at the smaller Kong in approval.
"A fine answer. We shall feast on the corpses of those demons tonight. To battle!"
rallied the war chief as she led her troops towards the front line. Donna felt her heart break. She watched as her egg brother made his way into the fortification she desperately escaped from. She swallowed her sorrow, slowly stood up and ran in the direction of the den. San and his weapons team made their way into a badly damaged fortification with the damaged heavy plasma caster and saw the carnage. The gunner that came with San sneered in rage.
"Get that thing out of the way so we can avenge our brothers and sisters."
The assistant gunner ran past the bodies and pushed the damaged weapon out of the opening of the fortification and started installing their own weapon. In the distance, they heard a distant but loud explosion towards the main area of the battle and watched in horror as a full squad was cut down. Finally, after long, costly seconds, they finished installing the weapon and took positions to fire back at the enemy when the gunners said,
"I can't see them."
In their scan for targets, they saw a long stream of muzzle flashes from a bush. The incoming fire slammed the opening and wounded the gunner, causing him to fall backwards. The gunner groaned as blood started pouring out from his armor. San ran to his dazed comrade and yelled in distress.
"Kawa has been wounded. Get him to the healers,"
the assistant gunner shouted as he got on the gun and started shooting in the direction of the muzzle flashes. Horrified, San grabbed the giant warrior's armor and started pulling with all of his might. Streaks of blood were left along the hallway leading out of the fortification as his war brother groaned in pain.
"I just got here and I'm already hit."
San had always daydreamed about being a warrior, fighting on the front lines with courage and pride, saving the life of his wounded friend. San tried to play it off.
"It pays to be smaller. You're easier to hit. I'll get you out of here, brother."
His war brother, entertained by the thought of a worker saving his life, gave an amused chuff. San dragged his war brother across a clearing into the jungle to get him to the makeshift aid station, and when they arrived, he saw only horrors. The screaming, the blood, and the yelling Keelers, working feverishly to save any life they could. San froze and felt nauseous from the smell alone. He realized right there, his daydreams were just that, dreams. Reality was far more cruel. However, he had to help his friend, so he yelled,
"Help! He's wounded."
A healer looked at him briefly and went back to doing triage. In frustration, he let go of his war brother and grabbed the healer.
"I said he needs help. Please."
The healer pushed him off and pointed.
"He's already dead."
San looked back. It was surreal. He had finally earned his war brother's approval and were becoming friends. Looking down, he saw the blood covering him. His hands were shaking, and his legs felt weak as he vomited all over the ground. A healer grabbed him.
"Get out of here and fight if you're not going to help,"
and pushed him out of the area. San staggered to the ground in shock. They had not even seen who shot him. It was like the Maw just plucked his friend out of nowhere without even giving him a fighting chance. Maybe Donna was right. No. He must return. This was his home, and he must defend it. He stood up in renewed courage and started to run back to the bunker when San noticed him. A lone figure standing on a large rock, a little more than 600 meters far away, outlined by the jungle canopy. He squinted his eyes and was ready to yell when everything turned white, and he was violently thrown tens of meters away. Fafoon! He didn't know how long he had laid there, but he knew he was hurt, and he couldn't hear. He coughed, and nothing but blood came out. He tried opening his eyes, but he could only manage to get one open. He felt his face with his hand. Blood, and a hole where his eyes should have been. He was around healers. He tried screaming for help, but he could only cough. He peered around to look with his good eye. The cluster had been rallied around the fortification, but now he only saw parts of bodies in a crater. He looked towards the healers and saw the same carnage. None of the healers were recognizable. He only knew they were healers because of what was left of their armor. He felt his consciousness fade in and out. When his hearing finally came back, the only thing he could hear was the sound of his own whimpering, and that dreadful noise. Crack! He opened his good eye and saw 4 figures slowly approaching through the haze of smoke and lingering dust. Crack! He tried to get up, but floundered. When he looked down at what remained of his lower body, he gasped and fell onto his face. Crack! That terrible noise was getting closer. The sound of death. He was flipped over and saw a green demon staring down at him. It bared its white teeth and made a low rumbling rhythmic noise as if it were singing a song. It held something in its hand and was pointed down at him. A strange barking language came out of the demon in a song. Nowhere to run to, baby. Nowhere to hide. San managed to whimper out.
No, but please.
Quack! Shut up, Bo, Sergei said in a familiar and deadpan voice as he walked by Animal Mother, shooting another severely wounded lizard on the ground. We can't take him prisoner, and I wouldn't want to be left to die slowly with my guts hanging out, Animal Mother retorted. Shar immediately chided. Yes, but stop enjoying it. The radio crackled to life. Malice, this is Mailman. Status. Jin was huffed as he replied. Mailman, this is Malice. Target destroyed. Thanks. Copy that, Malice. Happy hunting. Out. Gabe and Shar caught up to the rest of the team in a light jog. Gabe fist-bumped Jin, looked at the carnage, and just uttered, Oof. Jin laughed and said, We were about to be so fucked it wasn't even funny. As he poked a smoldering piece of armor, something inside was still burning. Barbecue was further up inspecting the remnants of the fortification to try to see if there was anything of interest inside. Everything's blown to shit. He spat and kicked some burning wreckage. Where's the man of the hour? Charisse said in a mocking tone. Barbecue sighed. The idiot lost his weapon during the explosion. Everyone turned to look back towards the uvual, scouring further back inside a bush. Heh, nice, mocked Gabe, half laughing. His aloof attitude caused Shar to huff and roll her eyes in irritation. Klaxus looked everywhere for his weapon, shifting through earth, rock, and burning wood that was flown in his direction from the 2 terrifying blasts. He brushed aside another bush and found a black piece of metal that resembled the barrel of the weapon. Grabbing it in delight, he however realized that what he was holding was in fact not the weapon, but a white-hot piece of shrapnel. Klaxus yelped in pain as he threw the object. Finally, after several minutes searching, the poor Uvil found his weapon, half buried just 10 meters away, covered in rock and dirt. Unfortunately, what he also found was a near-complete Kong head just a few meters away from it. It was larger than normal Kong warriors, and had the ceremonial markings of a war chief. Klaxus gagged, and he picked up his rifle and trotted to the rest of the team as they were poking and prodding, trying to find anything of use to abate this disaster. Klaxus walked next to Jin when he greeted everyone. Sorry, I lost my effectively thrown backwards by Jin, slamming the butt of his rifle into Klaxus' stomach. He hit the ground hard. Klaxus held his stomach, gagging and choking as the blood forced the air out of his lungs. He felt like he was hit by a tank, as he finally noticed Jin standing over him with malice in his eyes. A cold tone resounded further away as Shar said, You almost got us all killed. Gabe whistled. He was impressed. Wow, you managed to not only piss off Shar, but Jin as well? Congratulations. Jin immediately got on top of Klaxus, putting a knee right into his neck while unholstering his sidearm, pressing it to the head of the terrified and coughing mammal. An elite and seasoned Imperial officer. The human's mocking tone terrified him more than the plasma bolts. Highly trained and has extensive combat experience with the enemy. You are far worse than anyone fresh out of selection.
Please?
Klaxus managed to squeak out between gags and coughs. Jin holstered his sidearm and said, "You're right. Maybe something more personal instead," and pulled out his knife and pressed against his throat. Byung-sin, I always wondered what a real fur schma would feel like. Blood started trickling down his neck as he looked to the others for help, but they all just stared at him, looking irritated or bored. Oddly, it was Animal Mother that said something. "Chill, guys. The raccoon dude and the rest of the Imperial Army obviously don't fight like us. It's unreasonable to expect anything else. As a matter of fact, I think he performed well considering he doesn't know shit." Everyone turned their head and stared at him in utter shock. They never expected any type of reason that wasn't weapon or fieldcraft related to ever leave his mouth. Shar started. Bo, can you say that again?" "Unga bunga, me kill," Bo replied as he turned around and decided it was time for someone to pull security. Gabe shrugged and said, "He's right. It's our fault, really. We should have trained him up on the basics before we left. We know how these guys usually operate." He then turned around and followed Animal Mother. Shar sighed. She hadn't expected that out of either of them. She looked at Jin and said, "You heard him. Chill out. We're still alive." Jin glared at Klaxus before relenting and finally retracting his knife. He wiped the blood on Klaxus' uniform before sheathing it and stood to join Bo and Gabe. Sergei approached Klaxus and pulled him up. "You're lucky. They're giving you a chance." Klaxus' shaking hands went to the small med pack to grab a bandage. He wrapped it around his neck to stop the surprising amount of blood.
They were giving me a chance?"
He blurted out.
"They were seconds away from killing me."
Barbecue chimed in and said, "If they really disliked you, then they'd have just blown your brains out. This is a message. Don't fuck up anymore." Klaxus pointed and squeaked.
You're in command and you just let it happen."
He pointed in accusation. Shar was still standing there and said, "Welcome to the team. We don't do the prim and proper regular army bullshit. When you're rolling with us, you become family. If the family wants you dead, then you're gonna die." Klaxus stood there speechless. These thugs are the best soldiers humanity can offer? Then he fully noticed the destruction and carnage they left behind. It finally clicked with him. This wasn't a fight. This was precision violence. He fell on his ass when he noticed they did all of this without any of them taking any serious injuries. A mixture of awe and terror flashed before his face. Almost 200 of the Scourge lay dead, their heavy weapons in ruins, and the most these humans came out with was minor burns and a few scrapes and bruises. To replicate this, it would require at least a battalion with armored support, and they would take heavy casualties. Klaxus took a few minutes to regain himself before rejoining the group to help upturn the place in search of any intel or clues on where this large contingent came from. An impossible task when they had no idea what they should be looking for. All that was known was there was a fortification protecting something, or they were using this place as an observation post. There was no reason to have a bunker with a quick reaction force nearby, unless they knew we were coming through here. Were they starting to wise up to what we were doing? Klaxus wasn't paying attention to the humans as they fussed over why such a large force was present in the area. None of them could agree, so he was stuck on autopilot following them while still brooding over the implications of what just happened. Sergei sighed in frustration. "We haven't even made it close to our objective area and we've been compromised. Every fucking one knows we're here and we have nothing to show for it." Barbecue nodded in acknowledgement and said, "I got on the horn with Darkstar. We're to cover our tracks and egress to our extraction. The op is a bust." Sergei rubbed the back of his head and replied, "The only thing I can come up with is they're starting to get cautious and they're starting to set up observation posts." Barbecue looked around at the devastation around him with a troubled expression. "If that's the case, things are going to start to get much more complicated. I guess our patrols are going to have to avoid this area for a while since we've blown it to shit."
"There's a supply den close,"
Klaxus blurted out as he just remembered the conversation he overheard. Everyone stared at him. "What?" Gabe asked what everyone was thinking.
"There's a supply den here. The Scourge. Just before we fought, they were talking about protecting a supply den near here that links to the front line.
Klaxis nearly yelled in excitement. A few seconds of silence went by until Sergei asked, "You're certain? You're absolutely certain that is exactly what you heard?" Klaxis, flustered about his revelation, said,
"Yes, I'm positive. They also complain that there's an overlord there that's wary of you, but it seems none of the other soldiers take you seriously."
Barbecue was stunned. This was critical intelligence, and they needed to be debriefed ASAP. He flipped channels for Darkstar and informed them what he'd just learned. "Darkstar, be advised, we have found presence of a den containing the Overlord." Shar slapped Klaxis' back, sending him flying forward, and jovially said, "Nice work, new guy. You've redeemed yourself. We're going to drill the shit out of you when you get back." It was then that Klaxis felt the pangs of dread and regret seep into his heart. He should have kept his accursed mouth shut. Sergei walked away from the group as Barbecue made the call. He made his way to the area where they initially took contact. He pulled out a small, high-powered camera and started to do his job. It was time they did some recce work.